last night, but did you see?
I did, John, and like it's actually everybody's work because everybody's words are in it. So I think we're down to what's the word, structured approach now, but it is definitely a PRAG group email. Thank you so much for all your contributions as well, John, Dan, and Robbie.
So what we're talking about is that Rebecca drafted an email to send to Professor Brian Cox, the leading science communicator with BBC, and got a couple of us to help finalise that. And so it's been an interesting exercise in terms of thinking how do we communicate the message that we've been sharing when the public awareness of the potential to actually do something about the climate crisis is so low, and the scale of I suppose false belief about the potential for just a decarbonisation strategy to achieve climate results is so high. So thank you very much, Rebecca, for initiating that, and it's been quite a good process. So welcome everyone, and I might invite John Nissen to open our discussions of this PRAG meeting. Thank you, John.
Well, hello everybody. Just before the meeting started, I posted something which I'd been writing over the last hour or so, having very much second thoughts about our approach to scientists like Brian Cox. So basically I was inspired by Robert Chris, who pointed out that if you put tipping points together, the tipping points that Tim Lenton has talked about, and the inevitable global warming that Jim Hansen has talked about, if you put those together, you've got an inevitability about the tipping points if we carry on our current course. Therefore, we have to do something different, and we have to do it quickly because the tipping points are already active. So thank you, Robert, for your cry of misery or whatever it was about. And I've got a note of optimism. I think we've got now to the possibility of a social tipping point. And the action that I think would be most likely to kind of break through would be the refreezing of the Arctic, because people would think, oh well, that's not going to affect me. If it works, it works and reduces risks of tipping point. If it doesn't work, it won't have done any harm. So what I prefer to use, rather than Lenton's latest paper, is another one which he co-authored, which was with Stefan. It was the out of the Anthropocene. Anthropocene was in the title, and I put that as a reference, as well as Hansen paper. The point about this earlier tipping point thing is that he has the Arctic sea ice clearly as the focal point, and that influences things like the AMOC, that's the Atlantic Meridian overturning circulation, and the atmospheric circulation. The jet stream is in that paper or in the diagram, and we do know that if you reduce the temperature gradient between the Arctic and the equator, you upset the jet stream. It's just physics. There's less energy to drive the jet stream waves around the planet, and that's what we've been observing. It's still controversial in climate circles, but the physics is clear, and people like Brian Cox will understand the physics. But I don't think we need to go into so much detail. I think all we need to do is to talk about the fact that we've got lots of tipping points being triggered by the retreat of the sea ice, and these tipping point processes are already active, and they're showing signs of acceleration or steady growth. I think we've got a really strong case for refreezing the Arctic, and if our case was more generally known, and it could be promoted by some scientists who would give credence to our arguments, then we've got the possibility of tipping public opinion against, no, not against emissions reduction, but towards a more immediate goal of refreezing the Arctic. So we're not pronouncing anything about CO2 or emissions reduction. All we're saying is that we need some immediate remedial kind of repair action to stop the Arctic warming and then refreeze it. So that is a possible basis for a letter to Brian Cox. I think, with all due respect to Rebecca and Robert and Doug for working on a paper, on a letter to him, I really feel that what we need him to do is to help us with this, to making this idea of refreezing the Arctic something which can act as a social tipping point for action.
John, can I ask you, is this the chart that you were talking about? Oops, wait a minute. Can you see it? Well, it's not showing. There you go. Is that the one you're talking about?
I think that looks like the one. Yeah. I haven't got you on full screen. Let me put that on.
Well, it's hard to read.
Yeah, I think that's the one. That's Stefan et al.
Okay, very good.
Yeah. It's got.
Yeah, I like that chart.
It's so since then, Tim Lenton has done some kind of very peculiar U-turns. He's no longer talking about the Arctic sea ice as being a tipping point. He's talking about ice-free Barents Sea being ice-free in summer as a tipping point. The various other things. He's always been kind of rather kind of moving position, shifty, if you like. Stuff about tipping points, because he wrote something, or he co-authored a paper showing that the Arctic sea ice reached a tipping point in 2007. And then he kind of almost immediately rode back on that. So he's not really a trustworthy person, but that paper with Stefan is excellent. It's got it shows the kind of he's got a nice schematic about where, you know, we're hovering along a ridge and we can either fall into a hotter world, or we can go back into something more like the Holocene norms. But Tim Lenton has, when he's been in Cambridge and talked about being on a conference about fixing the climate, he's never talked about SRM. And the only person at the last conference who was really talking about that rather indirectly was James Lovelock. I don't know if anybody was attending that conference. It's a regular thing that Hugh Hunt does, and Nick Breeze is one of the driving forces behind that. Anybody know about that? Sheldon Huber was also at that conference, and I didn't hear his speech, but I don't think he mentioned SRM as the solution, the way out of the climate crisis.
Now, Rebecca wanted to speak, so
yeah. So I've
pass on to
spoken far
Rebecca.
too much. So over to you, Rebecca.
Hi, look, John, I think what you just said then is very succinct and understated, which is I love, of course. What I'm thinking is I'm happy for that for that flavour and that precise thing to be put into the front of the letter. And I don't know whether you or Doug or even maybe Robert, Chris, a new pair of eyes, would like to have a look at it. To do that, I mean, what I'm concerned about is two things, or three things really, and I haven't got a pen and paper, so I hope I can be succinct or even remember them all. But one of them is that scientific controversies are vast, as we all know, and Robert Tulip might like to speak in a minute about an experience he had at the ANU, which I don't even remember the details of, but with Will Stefan. And if we look like we're either A, being controversial ourselves and not recognising other points of view, or B, unaware of things, then we're going to look dumb, and I think we're going to, excite anger by anyone who gets quoted, and I mean particularly Will Stefan in that regard. Secondly, so what I'm saying is we just need to be understated and clear about who's saying what and what they're saying and what the implications are. I do love everything that you've just said about the tipping points. The second thing is that people do flip and flop, and you know, what one person says one day, they might not say the next day. They might have either changed their mind or forgotten, or they might have gotten frightened or whatever. And the third thing is that I got a bit nervous in the draft that you did, which, like, it's still a work in progress, but I thought what you were actually asking Brian to do was to start looking at detail in the area of science when there is controversy. And I'm sure he does know about this. He'd be on the line to Will Stefan all the time because he's got a huge collaboration here in Australia. I mean, I don't know who his scientific colleagues are, of course, but I'm just saying, I think if we want to put something a bit more scientific in the letter, then we should think about its tone, its approach, etc., very carefully. And I wasn't starting from there. I was starting from, he might be paralysed like the rest of us. Even Bill Gates is up there saying, you know, on TV last night, we've had it, and so on and so forth. So I was trying to do a different thing with the letter, but I like what you've said anyway.
Oh, good. Thank you. Well, one thing we could, so I could not bring up explicitly the point about the argument about the that long set of points in the argument about how Arctic amplification produces weather extremes. But I put that in a paper. So we've got Prague produced a paper which I presented at the AGU in December, oral as well as a poster, and the whole paper is in the poster, and hopefully that we can get that published by the AGU. If not, it may be rejected, but that may be just as helpful as if it isn't, because we can say it's a genuine draft for a pre-publication draft, and refer to that. I think Doug's probably got that on the website, or if Robert hasn't, on the Prague website, or yeah.
Which paper
John,
is it now, John?
I'd just like to welcome Mike Sassnet, who's a new member to everyone else has been here before. And do you mind if I just invite Mike to introduce himself?
Let me just close down that point I was making, because that draft pre-publication paper is available for all of you to see, and I can send it around again if you like as an attachment. Would you like that?
Yes, no, I'll put it on the Prague website.
Yeah.
Haven't done so already.
Yeah,
Mike.
great.
Yes. Hi. Thank you. I'm of course concerned about the climate situation, and thinking that an important task is to remove the legacy CO2. And I'm impressed with what biochemistry is capable of doing these days. I'm impressed with the rate of CO2 reduction seen in the summer months on the Keeling curve, and thinking it would be good if we could amplify that, extend it, increase the slope. And I think biochemistry could play a role.
I think you mean decreasing the slope, don't you, of the Keeling curve?
Well, okay, increasing the negative slope, yes.
We want to turn the CO2 rate of increase down, don't we? So we want to curve it round, and hopefully within a few decades we might be able to actually start going negative, so that net emissions are negative.
And this thought comes from the realization that humans on this planet are not going to stop burning fossil fuel anytime soon, and certainly, I mean, it has to become unaffordable. Otherwise, it's just going to continue to burn.
Yeah. So where are you based, Mike?
I'm in Los Altos, California. I am associated with Foothill College here and Robert Cormia. I don't know if that name is familiar.
Yes, Robert's quite active in climate.
Yeah. I assist. I work with Robert.
Oh, very good.
He sent me the link.
Okay. Yeah, nice to see you. I think one of the things that comes up for me in terms of what you said is John Nissen was speaking about the risk of tipping points, and my sense from Tim Linton's work is that there's just such vast uncertainty about tipping points and the complexity of the unstable system that we could face, sudden acceleration of tipping points at any time. And In that context, addressing the Keeling curve is obviously necessary, but it's too slow, and so that's why certainly my personal understanding focus has shifted to albedo as the key lever that we have to reduce that risk of
Yep.
sudden shift of tipping points, and so getting that balance between carbon-based approaches to climate change and albedo-based approaches to enhance albedo as a primary risk management lever has been part of the thinking that we've been discussing in the Prague group. So welcome, Mike. I might
Thank you.
go on to Doug Grant.
Okay, good, thanks. John, you said a word that took me off on a tangent, and I kind of missed what you're talking about a little bit. You said the word preprint, and all of a sudden I thought of Hanson's preprint. And I thought maybe that's what you're talking about, or are you talking about your own AGU paper as a preprint? And
Yeah, I
depending on
was.
what
Yeah,
you say,
yeah.
I have a comment.
Yes, there's a normal process. If you've published a paper on your or presented your paper at AGU or in a poster, you have an ability to submit your paper to the AGU for publication as an AGU publication, and I haven't even tried that in the past, but I will try and do that with our paper. There's kind of no deadline for doing it, and you are allowed to make some changes to the paper, so long as you keep to the general gist of what you presented.
So that prompts the question. I wasn't quite sure what my question was going to be, but if that's the case, I think if your paper is a preprint and Jim Hanson's is a preprint, we have to be careful in what we do with them, because they're not approved yet by the peer review, whatever.
Yeah,
Jim Hanson's
preprint is the wrong word. Pre-publication.
well,
a draft pre-publication. I think that's
Okay.
what.
Okay, so yours is the pre-publication. It's not as severe or serious as Hanson's waiting for peer review preprint, as I understand it.
Yeah, he's got further than I have.
Okay.
But as soon as I submit it through the process, then I'm in a similar situation to his.
Okay, got it. So we're talking about apples and oranges here. So one point, it occurred to me, I think over the weekend, that we do refer to Hanson pretty much as a matter of fact, what he said in his preprint. We don't know if he's going to come back with the final version saying the same thing about 10 degrees, for example. Hopefully he will, or maybe that's unfortunate. So I just want to make that point. And the other point I wanted to make was, I've forgotten the first point. I'll think of it later. Thank you.
So John, I've put that link to your AGU paper, A Model of Earth System Operation, as a basis for planetary restoration into the chat.
Yeah, thanks.
Now, where are we? Yeah, okay. So that indicates that we need to do a bit more work among the small group of us who've been working on the letter to Brian Cox, in line with the suggestions that John Nissen's made. And Doug, you wanted to speak? Yeah,
I remember the first. It actually is counter to what you just said. I really like John's putting that list of, I guess they were all tipping points in the letter. And the thought I had was, after watching the dialogue, was that this is an introduction. This is just to get Brian's attention. And I see a further series of messages. And that list could be in the next letter, the follow-up letter, after he responds yes. My feeling is now the letter is ready to go as an introduction, as Rebecca has explained. It does the job of the story and the personal contact and the good, fluffy, cozy feeling without a lot of science, and that the science could be developed strategically, carefully, step by step, as we have a dialogue. I see this as a series of exchanges, not just a one-shot deal. That was the comment I wanted to make, and I wanted to know if, John, are you really wanting to overburden this letter, which is now 2 pages, with more scientific fact?
No, I was thinking of a rather specific ask on refreezing the Arctic, because I think we've got a very strong scientific based argument for refreezing the Arctic.
Well, that phrase is mentioned in the second ask, down at the bottom of the second page.
I know, but if we could just get him to at least discuss that proposition.
I think we're better off not spending our time speaking about the details here when most of the people attending haven't seen this draft.
Yeah.
So
you're right. You're right, Rob.
I was very interested to see Robert Chris has put a link to a paper co-authored by Linton against solar radiation management in the chat, which I wasn't aware of that paper before. So thank you very much, Robert. Now let's go first to Rebecca and then to Robert.
Hi, everyone. Look, what I think is, could we take offline, just repeating what Robbie said, this, and I think if we could have one new, inverted commas, hard-ass scientist, or someone who's, quite technical, to read it and make sure that it's punchy enough. And also, I would like to do what Doug said and start having drafts of things getting ready to send, even unprompted. But this is all a lot of detail. I'm just saying that, anyway, thank you, John. I like what you've said, and it can't be vague and fluffy, even if it's friendly.
Thanks, Rebecca. Robert.
Robert, you're muted. No. Good.
I hope I'm not muted now. You can hear me okay? Yep. Robert actually covered my first point after I put my hand up, which is, of course, that I haven't seen the draft. So I'm in a bit of the dark here to know exactly what you're talking about. And I wonder whether or not it would make sense to circulate that so that we could all contribute to it. But I'll leave that to you guys to decide.
I have put my suggestion in an email which I sent just a few minutes before the meeting started. So was that
the text of the letter, the draft?
It was not, and I would not like it to go to everyone, because then it becomes a group exercise in the nuances of what we're trying to say to a highly eminent person. But it's not a secret. It's just that I don't want to embarrass Brian Cox or anybody else when we're trying to,
The second point I was going to make was that the other person that is very focused on refreezing the Arctic is David King. It's David King. And I wonder whether it might make sense to perhaps see if we can enjoin him in this process. He is obviously very well connected, and he may well have the ability to get through to somebody like Brian Cox, in a very much more informal and receptive way than we could. And I'd be very happy. I mean, I've got quite a good relationship with him, and I'd be more than happy to drop him a note or give him a call and ask and have a chat with him about it. But I don't, but on the other hand, we can't go down. We can't be doing this all over the place. But I've just thrown that out as a suggestion you might want to consider.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Robert. And we've actually mentioned Sir David in the draft letter. But as to whether Cox would even see a letter that was emailed to him by people who he doesn't know is dubious. He's a very busy and high profile person, and so like we have had this experience that personal introductions are often the only way to actually make contact with public figures, and so we can put a lot of work into something, and I fear that that's been the fate of many similar group letters, that because they've lacked that high profile support, they simply don't get seen. Thank you. And Rebecca?
I think the answer, Robert, is yes, please.
Well, look, I mean, you just tell me what you want me to do when you're ready.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'll
Okay. Well, we'll discuss it together.
Okay.
Okay.
Fine.
Rebecca.
What I could also.
Sorry, Robert, continue.
Just to finish off, I'm not sure that I've actually circulated this to everybody, but I did write an article that was intended for publication in The Conversation. And it deals precisely with the point that we're talking about. It brings together Hanson's paper and Lenton's tipping point issues, and goes right back to what John was talking about at the very beginning of this session. And it's a short piece, and Sir David King co-authored it with me. So his name's on this thing. Unfortunately, for reasons that neither he nor I understand, the Conversation are simply not responding either to me and not even to him. So they're not for publishing this thing, but I'll send it around, because you'll see it, see what it says, and it may well be useful or may not be, but it covers some of the issues we're talking about here, and it is in the Conversation style. It's quite short, so maybe of value, may not be, but I'll circulate that later on.
It's bizarre, isn't it? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Robert. Rebecca.
Thank you, everyone. Am I unmuted?
Yes, go ahead.
So, Robert, I love what you've said. And once we send this friendly, chirpy little letter from down under, if we do, then I might even anyway, it'll get to you and you can forward it to David King, and we can keep networking that way. It has to be a both and, with a letter, with information, consciousness raising and scientific, and then a personal approach. So that's great. Thank you.
I have mentioned to Sean Fitzgerald that we're developing this approach to Brian Cox, and so we can work with him through on that. Now,
can I ask you, Rob, what was Sean's reaction?
I haven't seen a reaction yet. So he may have sent me a reply, but I haven't looked at my emails. It's just I as soon as I woke up this morning, I opened up this meeting, so I haven't had that time yet. Now, the other thing that I wanted to raise was, I mentioned that I'll be travelling to the United Kingdom in May and June, and Peter Wadham's got back to me to say that it would be good to organise a meeting of those who are either in or would like to be in the United Kingdom at that time. So I'll be visiting Edinburgh and Cambridge and London at this stage, and I was thinking that organising a day. Peter thought it might be possible to organise something with the Centre for Climate Repair at Cambridge on possibly the theme of brightening the planet, or perhaps something related. So I wanted to raise that now, and I think around the 4th or 5th of June was the time I was thinking, or I was hoping to catch up with Stephen Salter in Edinburgh before that. So I really just wanted to mention that now and see if anybody had any thoughts on that.
Well, let me just chip in. I think it's an excellent idea, and I would love to join in. I am going to be probably unavailable from early June. Well, I'm not quite sure what date yet, but from early June through really to the end of July, because I've got some quite serious surgery to go through, and the date's not yet quite fixed. But it's going to be in the early part of June. So if it can be in May or the very beginning of June, that would be great.
Right. Okay. So possibly, yeah, the very beginning of June. Let's. Okay. Look, I'll have a look at. I've been working on. I'm traveling with my wife and working on an itinerary with her. So thank you, Robert. All right. So we'll just continue with that one on email. And I. Where are we up to? Open to anybody to suggest things that they want to raise now. Look, I wanted to. Sorry, no, I already made that point. I was going to say again, but sorry, go on. Anyone else?
Yeah, I mentioned some things that we needed to follow up, including one for me. I said that last meeting that I would write to the LSE, though I couldn't remember the acronym LSE, the London School of Economics, to argue the economic case for cooling, which I think is very strong and hasn't been appreciated. They probably assume that SRM is ruled out because there's so much antagonism to it. But if that's the only way forward, then they have to consider that. And if it can be done cheaply and harmlessly, then what's the objection? I think the paper by McMartin and other Smith, I think, was the first author name. Recently, last year, on subpolar injection of SO2 into the stratosphere was extremely reassuring that it could be done in a pretty harmless way. They did have some. They did say some things which I questioned, but so I've got to write to Doug McMartin and see if I can get some reassurance about that. So that's one action, and another one was the approach on the moral front. I think there's a very strong moral case for albedo enhancement of the planet and the Arctic in particular. So, and I think some efforts had already been tried with the Council of Churches, but I think we need to push a bit harder on that. Is anybody willing to take that up?
Yeah, sure. So I've written a paper on the moral issues around geoengineering, and I was going to publish that on the Healthy Planet Action Coalition website, and I think finding ways to open up that conversation with religious communities is quite a challenge, because there's just such a lot of just preconceptions around the topic. So finding entry points is a challenge, but it's something that I continue to look for opening points. But I do have quite a lot of contact with that international ecumenical community, and would like to see them pursue it further. I know it's something that Peter Fikowski followed up through his conference with the Pope a few years ago, and so I've been quite involved here in Australia with the dialogue between ecology and theology. But just finding the space within that sort of conversation for a geoengineering approach it's a bit discombobulating for people who are not used to that sort of technological approach to theology.
Nick Breeze did a. Have I got my thing? You can hear me. Nick Breed had an interview with the ex-Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams. I think that was a few years ago. But Nick Breeze was a follower, I think, of the Stuart. I can't remember whether Stuart was his surname or his first name.
George Scott. George Scott.
Yeah, Stuart Scott is the man I'm thinking of, who was very well connected. Unfortunately, he died of cancer tragically young, only recently. But he had his friends, and I think Nick Breeze was one of them. And there's also there are other people who would know him and be able to help us, so we can make this a multi-pronged approach and swap notes as to what we're trying to get across. So, Robert, if you could keep me in touch with what your tactics are, copy me letters and things, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I edit the magazine of our regional church magazine, and so I included the transcript of my interview with Robin Williams on the ABC Science Show about geoengineering. I got some very positive feedback from it. People saying that it had never occurred to them that increasing albedo could be a way to address the climate crisis, and I think that's a very common situation. That it's just an idea that people hasn't occurred to people. So I've just finished reading the latest book by Vaclav Smil called "How the World Really Works," and he's got an extensive. One of his major themes in the book is that the inertia and momentum of the fossil fuel economy is so great that the prospect of cutting emissions is absolutely remote. But then somehow he doesn't take the logical inference from that the risk of tipping points creates a threat to planetary security that we should be looking for other ways of addressing that threat. And so there's no mention whatsoever of anything connected to geoengineering in his book, and I just find it like there's just for me it's a sort of cognitive dissonance that you've got this esteemed scientific leader who absolutely recognizes that the cutting emission agenda is impossible, but then just doesn't seem to express any alarm at the risk that poses of sensitivity of the Earth system. Doug.
Yeah, it seems to me, I was having a conversation with a friend last night exactly about this. We don't have contingency plans. We have a plan. We're going to do it. God damn it, we're going to do this. And that's not going to happen. We need to have contingency plans. Now, I'm going to put something on my screen here. I just came across in my email. So I don't want to share screen. I just want to put it up. I want to change my, where's the right button here? You go ahead. It's going to take me a minute or two. Michael Mann has just put out that he's got a new book. And I want to show you the title of the book. So go ahead and talk amongst yourselves. I'll get it in the background here.
Okay, you're welcome to share screen if you want, Doug.
Well, you don't need to really.
No worries. Okay.
While we're waiting, Robert, could you tell us the name of the author and the book that you're referring to?
It's Vaclav Smil, How the World Really Works. And one of my activities at the moment, I participate in a online book discussion group called booktalk.org, and this book by Vaclav Smil is our current discussion. So we've just got underway with that. So I look forward. I've only just finished reading the book, so I'll just start engaging in some online discussion around it. So Our Fragile Moment by Michael Mann is Doug's.
Yeah, so the thought I had was, we don't know what he's going to say in this, and I'm thinking that he might have the answer we're looking for, or at least a door open as to a contingency plan. And, you know, I was a corporate planner, and you always, from my perspective, you had to say, yeah, this is the market forecast and this is what we're going to do, but you never know if the market forecast is going to happen. So you got to have a contingency plan, or at least take that into account. And I don't see that anything that any of these scientists are doing has any sort of contingency as to what if we can't, like you just said. What if we can't? They don't. So anyway, I think we all ought to get that book. We ought to give Michael Mann $25 of our hard-earned money and buy that book. Can you read it?
Yeah, can I chip in here? I think that, I mean, the points that you're referring to, I mean, the fact that Vaclav Smil doesn't make any reference to geoengineering, the fact that you know, there's no contingency plan, all of these are just pieces of a jigsaw, which are all part of a piece that comes from the fact that what we are confronted by is a set of circumstances which are so serious and so dire that we have no precedents upon which to structure them. So when you talk about, Doug, when you talk about the contingency plan is what happens if we actually do have the collapse of civilization as we know it. I mean, that's what, you know, because that's the other scenario, you know. and this requires a mindset to kind of get away. It's a total paradigm shift in a very real sense, a total paradigm shift that requires you to recognize the fact that what we have grown up to believe, where change can happen in a, if not an orderly fashion, certainly in a gradual fashion, that there are moments in history, and this looks like it being one, excuse me, where things do happen abruptly, and where the failure to anticipate those abrupt changes essentially victimizes more or less everybody. And you can't insure against this because it's not a risk that afflicts only a few. So you can pool the risk, and those that don't suffer the peril can cover the costs for the others. This is an affliction that hits everybody at once. And so, you know, the contingency plan is the preppers. You know, that's the contingency plan. And it's not something that anybody wants to think about for obvious reasons. I mean, it's a bit like giving somebody a terminal diagnosis.
Sorry, what's the contingency plan? You said?
The contingency plan is the collapse of civilization as we know it.
Right.
You know, how do you plan for that? Let me ask you this question. I mean, we're all of an age, most of us are of an age, that we probably have grandchildren. Not everybody here, but most. And you know, I've got 3 grandchildren, a 2-year-old, a 10 and an 11-year-old. Now I ask myself the question, what kind of future are these kids going to have in 50 to 60, when they're my age, when they're in their 70s? Okay? And how do I prepare them? How should their parents now prepare them for that future? And you know the answer I have? There is nothing that you can do to prepare them for it, because I have no idea how it's going to unfold. It's going to be very messy, and it's going to be just a case of luck. And that is the contingency plan, to maximize the opportunities. It's a very bleak scenario, and I'm being very negative here, but I do feel that false optimism at this stage, short-term optimism, that this is something that we can deal with, is ill-placed, because
But
you know,
Robert,
as you just said,
that's why I regard solar geoengineering as precisely that, an insurance policy. And so to say brightening the planet is our best insurance, and you know, we are living in a house that has no insurance policy, and where we have you know, a large forest, very dry, very hot, very windy, right next door, and as we've just had the 20th anniversary of our Canberra fires, where 500 houses were burnt down in precisely that circumstance. So it's although most of them had house insurance, but as you know, many people don't have flood insurance, which is another story. But so the framing of brightening the planet as an insurance policy I'm not sure if that's that has been done. Like your mention of insurance now, it's something that I've heard before, but I haven't seen anybody write on that in any strategic way.
well, I think the problem here is, I mean, this is a problem that I have kind of had to grapple with for the last 15 years as I've been involved in this topic. Brightening the planet, albedo enhancement, whatever, you know, removing emissions. We have never been short of viable solutions to these problems. That is not the problem. Albedo management is now on the table because the other solutions weren't implemented quickly enough. So the fundamental question now is, all right, albedo enhancement could be the saving grace. It could be the thing that rescues us. But you've got to go behind that, Robert, and you've got to say, what are the circumstances that have to prevail for albedo enhancement to be done at sufficient scale and speed for it to be effective? And then you immediately, in my view, and I just hope I'm wrong about this, but this is where I'm coming from, you immediately get mired into exactly the same politics that emissions abatement and CDR have been mired for the last 20 years. That it's all too radical. Everybody wants to wait. There's uncertainty out there. One of the great games of the oil and gas sector is, well, the science is uncertain. We need to wait until we really know. And of course, by the time we really know, it's going to be too late, and so on. So the issue is not here about whether we've got a solution in the form of albedo enhancement. It's about how do you get people to make the paradigm shift to actually make it happen. That's the problem. And that is the thing that I find most challenging. I think that what could happen is that albedo enhancement is going to go down the same road that emissions abatement have gone down. That's my fear.
Okay, Doug?
Yeah, so we have a different definition of contingency plan. I see a contingency plan as exactly what we're doing. And Rebecca has launched the first salvo in that contingency plan, which is to get somebody who can speak eloquently about this to the general public and perhaps to some politicians or whoever, we haven't determined yet, is the person with the money and the keys. And I think the approach or what you're suggesting is predetermining that it's not going to happen. And I think we need to go into this as indeed it's going to happen. And Brian is one of the key people to make it happen.
I totally agree. I'm not trying to be defeatist. I'm just trying to be realistic. You know, we're in a small group here. We're talking about this private, and this is not a message.
Right.
This is not a message I would go out to the public with in the first instance, because it has to be accompanied with some message of hope. You know, we can do this, absolutely. But you know, we have to recognize in this forum that what we are asking to be done is not an easy ask.
Rebecca?
Yes, look, I think what we're discussing is absolutely to the point of our grandchildren, even people like me that haven't got one yet, so to speak. So after Brian Cox, we can think about Bill Gates, we can think about whoever, but let's just find a way of communicating that we have got a solution. That's the main thing. And that it can be tested. Even Hansen says that in his paper. We've got to evaluate the risks of not doing it as well as the risks of doing it. So a plain way to say there is an answer, as well as we're all stuffed if we don't do anything, if we continue with status quo. That's what I would like us to do. And that's what I found in this group is the only people who are actually talking about solutions, small and big collectively, that amount to something.
Can I just ask, so shifting this very slightly, does anybody have a view about the role in the whole albedo enhancement discourse, about the potential role, whether it's positive or negative, that Indigenous people can play?
Yeah, I certainly have a very positive role, and this is it actually is something that we were talking about with Rebecca and John Nissen. Just the idea of a science of connection as something that recognizes the earth as sacred. That sort of religious framing of the climate crisis in a way that draws from Indigenous spirituality is something that and I think that the blockages that we face, the sense that albedo enhancement is a techno fix, that it's using the same thinking. I mean, to the way Greta Thunberg frames it in her. I was just flicking through her big fat compendium on climate change in the bookshop, and there's a couple of pages on geoengineering, and her comment is that, or the comment of her co-authors in that section is that geoengineering involves a continuation of the same domineering thinking that got us into the problem in the first place, and that is such a futile thinking. But you can see the level of anger that there is among Indigenous people about their situation. It's certainly something that's been very prominent in Australia, with Indigenous people calling for just very radical ideas that have got very little prospect of success. And so I think that framing the work that we're doing as supportive toward Indigenous worldviews and Indigenous progress and advancement is helpful. Rebecca?
Yes, look, I'd like to say, I think I'm sorry about what Greta said. However, we can't assume anything about Indigenous people because they have diverse views and they need the same love and respect when they're being approached as, like, we need to just start off from ground zero with them, that they know nothing. They have their philosophy and their science, but how to get out of it, they don't know any more than anyone else. And so I think to me, it's a side thing at the moment. Like, I've got a friend, a Mapuche Indian from Chile, who I was explaining it to, who would like to know, and I'm going to start off with her from the beginning. But if trying to move beyond the worldview that we all come from Mother Earth and so on, which is actually European as well, and it's the Gaia hypothesis, to get beyond that level of generality and beyond the arguments that it's capitalism that caused it and so on and so forth, it's a careful, slow process, in my view.
One way we can help we might get Indigenous people on our side is the people in the Arctic who want their sea ice back. So refreezing the Arctic should be something they would really appreciate.
Well, they weren't very keen on David Keith's experiment, the Scopex.
Well, exactly, because it wasn't explained to them, or whoever. They was persuaded by some probably well-meaning people, but persuaded that geoengineering was intrinsically dangerous. So there is a kind of mafia, a very, very powerful mafia who are against SRM, and they're probably backed by the fossil fuel industry. So they've probably got lots and lots of money behind them. And there was the people I came across early days described anybody who said there was a climate crisis, this was porn, climate porn. That was the accusation. And of course, we don't need SRM because the planet will sort itself out. And this is on its own accord. And all we have to do is to reduce our emissions, and all will be well. But that mafia persists, and the mafia was prepared to send somebody towards suicide in the ClimateGate affair. So they hobnobbed individuals at the University of East Anglia, and some at least one was very near to suicide as a result. I mean, they are very, very nasty people, and that's why you won't get anybody saying that we've got to do SRM because of this mafia. And Peter Bukowski knows it very well. He said proposing SRM is suicidal. That's what he said.
Robert, Chris?
Yeah, I was just going to pick up on something that you said a moment ago, Robert, because you were talking about framing the albedo enhancement debate in terms that would be attractive. That wasn't the word you used, but would be received well by the Indigenous community. And I wonder, I mean, just looking at the screen, you know, we are all of a type here. There's not a lot of diversity on this group. And I wonder whether there is some way of engaging a wider community in these discussions, and particularly, you know, specifically, maybe if we get some Indigenous representation in here. I know that, you know, Rebecca's right that not all Indigenous people think the same thing, but then not all white middle-class people think the same thing either. So I don't think the diversity should be seen as a threat. In fact, on the contrary, I think the diversity is a great asset, and that maybe that's something that we should give some further thought to. It's not a thought I'd had until the last half hour, but you know, I'd throw that out there for consideration.
Yeah, the way I see it is that we take the people that we have who join our conversations, and you know, we advertise these meetings to a range of groups, and if people you know, take an interest in the sort of strategic vision, but it's something that I think as we write on our views, that we should take into account. So I gave a talk which Rebecca helped organise at the at her church, and I incorporated some comments on Indigenous culture into that talk. But finding ways to engage people in direct dialogue is very challenging. Yeah, it's an important question.
Okay, I've got a possibility. I'll give some thought. I've got one person that I know that I might be able to approach, see what his thoughts are, and he's quite prominent in the Northern European Indigenous folk.
Yeah, it's a really major debate at the moment in Australia, because we have this. The new government has proposed a constitutional change to establish an Indigenous voiced parliament, and it's created a quite furious backlash at both ends of the political spectrum, with the right wingers basically saying, we don't want Aborigines to have more political power, and the left wingers saying, well, it doesn't give us enough power. And then the 60% mainstream saying, well, it's a positive incremental step to recognise Indigenous people. So this whole and Australian culture has really shifted very rapidly into a sort of tokenistic respect towards Aboriginal people. With opening every meeting with a statement of respect for Aboriginal people, but then that not really being followed up with any practical steps, and Indigenous people being in a really disastrous social situation in many places. So it's a very very prominent concern, and finding ways to integrate our views, like the way I've approached it has been through the concepts of Earth system sensitivity and fragility, and that I think is something that keys into the old Indigenous concerns. Like it goes back to movies like Kayana Squatsi, Earth Out of Balance, where that sort of Indigenous apocalyptic perspective of that the European vision is a vision of planetary destruction, is something that can be integrated into a path out of the crisis. Rebecca.
Hi, everyone. Two things. One is that a few of us are doing a lot of talking, which whatever, perhaps others might like to say something. But also, I really think we mustn't lose focus in this group on the science itself and what it adds up to, because that is the bedrock that everyone needs. If they're going to start thinking and behaving differently, we must actually understand there is something that can be tested. So I hope that we don't lose our scientific focus, even though personally I've got an action that I'm going to go and meet with my Mapuche friend and start from the beginning and see if she'd like to join. But if we widen the circle, we must stay focused on the science and the import of it, in my opinion. But maybe other people would like to say something.
Well, anybody's at liberty to raise their hand if they've got a contribution.
My hand's raised, Robert. Sorry
Hi,
for
Grant.
the late arrival.
I see you're in Costa Rica.
I'm in Costa Rica, yes. And this is a delightful little piece of a warming planet at the moment. What I have realized is that the science is crucial and key to all of what we do, but there is a gap in understanding between what we as being involved participants understand and the larger population. The one of the numbers I recall from a wide US survey a few weeks ago was 79% of the US population across all demographics recognize climate change is a problem. And that is a very, very big swing from a similar study made, I think it was only 8 years ago. And so while there is a whole general awareness of the impact of weather extremes, which I think is perhaps the underlying cause of the awareness, the awareness of a possible solution is probably zero. The population has been convinced by repetition that just getting renewables and cutting down emissions and planning a gasoline or a fossil-free future is going to make the difference. And we are in a small group of people who realize that's not the whole story. And so I do think that it's one of the challenges I'm taking on for this year is to improve my ability to communicate with the public about the existence of a solution or alternate solutions that could shorten the time to a happier life for everybody. And my targets are, firstly, I'm targeting Californian politicians. I'm targeting smaller newspapers in the state. I will go after the climate correspondents on the major newspapers. But what I have realized is that it's more than just a single, well-crafted, elegant piece of prose describing multiple means of cooling the planet. It has to be a repeated messaging that builds from ignorance to an awareness and hopefully builds a story as it goes. So until we get the general population better informed of the potential for a solution, I can't see the politicians moving, even though there is incentive from the government, from the National Science Foundation. There will be research done, but until the general public, of whom I am still a member, gets to accept that there's something that can be done, I don't think there's going to be a rapid change. So that's what I'm.
We
Sorry,
lost the audio, Grant.
lost you there, Grant. Your connection's breaking up. I'm sorry.
That's quite possible. So this is my challenge, and this is my focus for the next few weeks to see whether I can put together a campaign that builds information content and momentum and awareness and response. And I look for assistance in all directions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Grant. That's good work.
Okay, we haven't heard from Manager.
Yeah.
I'm
or
sorry, I was on mute. I have a small group here in the Hudson Valley, and we're trying to learn and teach each other global climate science and climate solutions. and share with others in a very nonpartisan, we're not pro-con, we're just saying, this is what's out there, this is what exists, these are what the problems are. And there was a gentleman named Stephen, I think Penningroth, that was on one of these series of calls. And now he's in Syracuse and he's joined our group. It's a small group, but I think we're on the right track to doing, just that, the idea of educating ourselves and educating others. And I put in the chat a request. Each week we're reading something. Last 2 weeks, we read two of Jim Hanson's, the preprint and something that was published, and had a really valuable conversation. And actually, we have a high school student as part of our group, and he used an AI system to record it. And we're going to clean it up a little bit and share that widely. We have a library, a virtual library, where we're putting articles, a lot of articles that we're getting from these groups, and really just trying to educate ourselves and figure out how to educate others. There's a woman named Margie Tarrant who has been studying in Greenland from Lamont Doherty Earth Institute, which is in our region. And we're going to reach out and see if Margie will share some of her findings. Andy Revkin is also from this region. And so Doug's seen the PowerPoint that I give to high school students or whoever's interested to try to help them understand the whole global picture. And then we have a list of the geoengineering solutions so that people will know what is being considered. And my question in the chat was what we'd like to read up on more. And I have that little diagram as part of my PowerPoint on tipping points that Doug Grant showed earlier. But is there a really good article or reading material that we could share with our group on to better understand tipping points? And the last thing I want to say is in my county, Ulster County, the woman who is now county executive just today redeclared a climate emergency with a list of 13 things, all of which are essentially emission reductions strategies. But at least, there was a big press conference, the who's who were there. And my comments, I was one of the speakers, and I talked about the global science and the tipping points. I am extremely frustrated having put a lot of time and energy into educating communities about solar sighting, in encouraging them to take leadership, and they learn and they nod, and then we're not seeing on the ground results. And in the meantime, the state is really pushing for beneficial electrification of buildings and transportation, which is going to put more demand on the grid. But we're just not seeing the transition to a renewable energy economy in the way we should. So, that's my quick update. But people are taking the question really seriously. And most of the people that I talk to and mention climate restoration and geoengineering are interested. Some of them are like, the immediate reaction is, You know, Mana, how can you be even thinking about this? And I say, how can we not think about it? And so, yes, I sincerely wish that with massive emission reductions, the Earth could restore balance. But given the fact that a chunk the size of London broke off the Antarctic shelf this past week, and I explained to people what that means in terms of sea level rise, and I very quickly touched on the Arctic and Antarctic importance of the polar vortices, and as they loosen, what that does to the jet stream and so forth, trying to slip in a little climate science. But
Yeah, I've included an article in the
yeah,
chat.
I'm done. It
Yeah,
scares the daylight out of me. You know, and we really do want to focus on tipping points, because I think that is a way to reach people. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I've put an article in the chat which I found quite helpful about tipping points, which was a summary in the Guardian of the major Nature paper published last year. So have a look at that one, Manna, and others, and see if you found that made sense to share with your group as a discussion starter. I think that's one to consider. So, Doug, now, but just before you go, Doug, we've got 5 minutes to go. We haven't heard it all from Brian or Achim or Jonathan. So, if any of them wish to, or Mike spoke briefly at the start. If any of them wish to contribute, you've just got a couple of minutes now. But over to Doug.
You want me to go now?
Yes, please.
Okay, just real quick, it occurred to me last night, I had an hour and a half Zoom call with a friend who led a walk from Hardisty, Alberta, down to the town where the tar sand pipeline ends in Nebraska. And I haven't seen her in 10 years, but it occurred to me she might have some answers. So I spent an hour and a half with her, and we see she's a Buddhist nun, or is it a Buddhist priest? I'm not sure. Trying to start a farm in Minnesota. Really interesting character with a physics degree. We saw eye to eye on. We're going to continue that conversation, and I just am full of hope from the sort of serendipity that happens through this process. That's all.
Yep. Thanks. It's good to talk to different people, isn't it? And all right. So, any other final comments before we finish up?
Robert, I was hoping that yourself, John, me, and Doug could stay on. And Robert, if you've got, I can't and don't want to take more than 5 minutes, but Robert, if you wanted to stay on as well, that would be really helpful, rather than having another 6 emails on the draft letter to Brian Cox. Could a few people just stay on for a moment or two?
I'm happy with that.
But the other Robert was me, yeah?
Yes, you.
Rebecca. Fine, I'd be happy to, yes. Yeah.
All right. Well, it looks like we're done, and we'll conclude the meeting. Thank you all very much for joining us. I think it's been a constructive conversation, and look forward to catching up again soon, and to seeing discussion in the interim on email. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Yeah, and thank everybody for taking on actions upon themselves, because that's what we need. If we can all do our little bit.
And I just want to say to Manna Joe, what you're doing is fantastic. I've looked at your material, and you're doing a lot of curation, which is what people need. They need a way into the thicket of information, and I love what you're doing.
Yeah, manager's already left us.
Oh, I see. Never mind.
But
Well,
that's
I'll
all
say
right.
that next time.
Well, it's on the recording. So
Yes.
I'll end the recording at this point.